Well, the Democratic Alliance is proposing that the National Assembly establishes an ad hoc committee for executive oversight and protection of civil liberties during the lockdown. DA leader John Steenhuisen joins us now on the line. John, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. So tell me what's worrying you to actually warrant this ad hoc committee to oversee things.
Well, what we'd like to do is to make sure that Parliament, even during this time of lockdown, meets its constitutional obligation in terms of Section 55 of the Constitution to exercise oversight of the executive and organs of state. It's simply not right that Parliament just shrinks away or disappears from the scene during this period, particularly given the fact that we're in a state of a national disaster, and there is a requirement that there is civilian oversight over the exercise of military and policing powers as well as those of the executive. So it makes sense that a committee is set up that can meet via an online platform that is able to ensure there is sufficient oversight and that the Bill of Rights and the constitutional rights of South Africans are still safeguarded even during this important period.
You're also raising concerns about complaints from the public with regards to the SANDF, right?
Yes, of course. And we've been seeing and being sent a number of disturbing reports from residents as well as witnessing on social media some very heavy-handed behaviour on behalf of the SANDF and the SAPS. And obviously that's not in the spirit of which these 21 days should be taking place. This has to be a partnership and a cooperation. What we can't do is allow an authoritarianism or jackboot mentality to set in over the 21 days. And we must make very sure as civilians and as democratically elected public representatives that the temporary does not become the permanent. I think we've seen some ministers really enjoying this new power that they have, and we want to make it very clear to them that this is a temporary measure and it's certainly not something they must get used to going forward.
So, John, just tell us about whether you've spoken to other opposition parties and if they're in agreement on this oversight ad hoc committee.
Well, we haven't obviously had a chance to talk with the other opposition parties, but I don't think that there's a single opposition party in the House who would not agree that we can meet via online platforms. I've been using Zoom all week to keep the meetings of the party going forward, and there's no reason why that it cannot meet like that. The rules provide that a committee doesn't have to meet in Parliament. It can meet at a venue determined by itself, and that wouldn't preclude an online platform. That would mean we respect the social distancing, but would also ensure that this important period is make sure there is some civilian oversight over what is happening.
Yeah, you mentioned that some of the ministers are enjoying their powers during this lockdown period. Are you concerned or unhappy with any of the decisions taken?
I'm not concerned with the decisions taken, but I am concerned with the relish that obviously someone like Minister Betty Cele has shown on TV when questioned around the authoritarianism and some of these scenes of unnecessary force against civilians during this period. This is obviously a very new era in South Africa. People are not used to this type of policing, and I think there needs to be a far greater understanding that this should be a period of great cooperation and not one where you're seeing a heavy-handed use of force by the SANDF and the SAPS during this period. I know that certainly those ministers, once have tasted the authority and the powers that go with a special time like this, it may become something that they become far too accustomed to. As Parliament, we need to be there to remind them that these powers are temporary and they're not going to become permanent, and that we are a constitutional democracy based on the rule of law under which the Bill of Rights has to be upheld. And as citizens, we do have rights in terms of what we can expect from government and what we can expect in terms of transparent, open policing that places the country's interests first and does not allow for an abuse of power in any way, shape or form.
So just in terms of transparency, John, of course the President has met with opposition parties a couple of times now to let them know what's going on. But you, of course, want more transparency in terms of the National Council Command that's dealing particularly with COVID-19 and how we actually manage it in South Africa during this lockdown period. Is that correct?
There's only been one meeting with the President, and that took place some 2 weeks ago. There's been no further meetings with the President and opposition parties, which in itself is a bit of a problem because obviously we have an important role to play in sharing information and ensuring that we're able to make sure accurate information is getting out there. But nevertheless, I've been in correspondence with the President's office most notably around the confusion that has existed with ministers that have contradicted each other on the SMME regulations, and we'll continue to have that open line of communication. We support the President and we support the efforts being made by government, but we do also want to make sure that we support the constitutional democracy that we all ensured that we had in South Africa, and that the principles of a constitutional democracy are still upheld every single day.
All right, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. DA Leader John Steenhuisen.